please.
Thanks, Andrew. Just give me a second and I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so yes, I think Andrew has sort of briefly introduced me anyway. My name is Tian En, and I'm a clinician. So I am a senior resident in ophthalmology at the Singapore National Eye Center. And thank you for, to Dr. Andrew Fang as well as Blockchain and Healthcare Today for inviting me to share some of the work that myself and my team have been able to publish recently in May. And I don't have any financial disclosures in what I'm presenting today. So, well, as you know, I think the topic or what I'm really going to be presenting today is what we managed to publish in May in the Lancet Digital Health, and we were quite lucky that the editor liked it and picked it as their editor's pick. Um, I think I want to start here, especially because this is the Blockchain and Healthcare Today webinar, by putting an important disclaimer here that I'm really not a subject matter expert or a domain expert. And probably the irony is that most of you here may know more about blockchain technology than I do. But I think the interesting thing about this is its potential application in clinical research as well as in the clinical domain. And I think that's where the collaboration becomes quite interesting. So anyway, I hope to learn from some of your comments or questions as well, as to how we improve this or develop new ideas in the space. And in relation to that, I think yeah, I really have to thank everybody who was involved in this paper, because I couldn't do it alone, not by a long shot. I would like to thank, of course, my mentors, Dr. Daniel Ting, who is here today, as well as Professor Wong Tian Yin, who mentored me in this project, as well as in some of the other, many other research projects as well. And really, I think this project was dreamt up by Dr. Daniel Ting, as well as some collaborators like Dr. Liu Yong and team from A-Star. As you will see, there were a lot of moving parts in this project. There's the clinical aspect that needed a lot of clinical data, both locally as well as internationally. And so I have to thank my collaborators from SNEC, SERI, as well as our other collaborators who are too numerous to name. And a lot of credit has to go to the technical team from IHPC at A-Star, who really did I would say, the heavy lifting on this work. So I'm aware that, of course, not everybody here has an ophthalmology or even medical background. And so I hope you allow me just a few minutes to sort of explain the rationale for the clinical application of this paper. I guess everybody here will know what myopia is. In fact, I'm willing to bet that a good proportion of the people on this webinar are myopic. I mean, what does it mean really to be myopic? In a normal circumstance, light falls on the retina in the right because of the length of the eye, light falls on the retina and it produces a sharp image. But in individuals who are myopic, then the eyeball is excessively long, and as a consequence, you don't get a sharp image on the retina, and you need glasses to correct it. But there are also some, consequences of having the eyeball that is excessively long, and I'll show you some of that in a bit. The problem with myopia that we were hoping to address with this paper is that there are many, many individuals in the world who are myopic, and this is only set to get worse. So projections have it that staggering sort of 5 billion people are going to be myopic by the year 2050, and which is really quite a staggering number. And as you can see, the rates of myopia are just projected to climb decade on decade. Most of them will be okay because most of them can just wear glasses and their vision will improve. But you'll notice as the rates of myopia increase, there's about 20% or a fraction of them who are going to have high myopia. And these are the ones who we think are going to have, risk of permanent blindness or serious sight-threatening complications. This is a retinal photograph of a patient's left eye, and this is very clearly a very highly myopic individual. This patient has a serious sight-threatening complication of myopia, which we call MMD, or myopic macular degeneration. And basically what happens is that in the center of the macula here, which is what we use for our sharpest vision, the cells here are atrophied and dead. And basically this patient, even if you correct his myopia with glasses, is not going to see well. And this is a permanent cause of visual loss that we are, one of the causes that we hope to avoid, among many others. Because there's such a large number of people who are projected to be myopic, then obviously there are going to be a large number of individuals at risk of such problems. And the problem with dealing with such a large number of these individuals is how do you risk stratify them? How do you determine which are the ones who need to be evaluated by ophthalmologists and who needs to be on regular follow-up? And I can tell you that in SNEC and in other eye clinics around the world, uh, we are full of patience, and there's no way we'll be able to screen these 5 billion myopic individuals on a regular basis. Furthermore, to find out who is myopic or highly myopic or who has MMD requires expertise, either by clinical examination, or even if you take a photograph, you need someone who's trained to look at it. And if you want to determine if someone's highly myopic, then you need a bunch of expensive equipment or manpower to determine their refractive status. And so the idea for this project, it was really born that perhaps deep learning and AI could be useful tools for automated detection or screening of these high-risk individuals among those the large global population with myopia. I'm sure I don't need to tell everybody here at this webinar that artificial intelligence already has and will continue to change how we practice medicine in the years to come in various domains, such as drug discovery, developments in how like Google DeepMind's AlphaFold can predict protein structures are going to change science and medicine for years to come. But really a lot of the advances that we see, and that's directly relevant to this paper, would be advances in automated medical image analysis. So this happens in all fields of medicine. For example, this is a paper that was published in Nature where they use an algorithm to screen for breast cancer from mammograms, and it was very successful. You can also do that with photographs of skin lesions, and an algorithm can tell you whether a skin lesion is likely to be benign or malignant. And these are just some of the sort of landmark examples across the fields of medicine. Ophthalmologists are not left behind. In fact, a lot of the new developments in AI and deep learning have come from ophthalmology. So from just a photograph, actually, we can screen and diagnose a lot of major ocular diseases, such as diabetic retinopathy, glaucoma, and age-related macular degeneration that are major causes of visual loss in both the developing and developed world. We can do cooler things than that in the eye. AI algorithms can automatically look at the vessels of an eye, and they can actually predict someone's cardiovascular risk or the chance that this person is going to have a cardiovascular event in the years to come. And this was recently published as well by other members at CERI. We've got other exciting imaging modalities in the eye other than just photographs, and this is an OCT scan. You can see here that AI algorithms can automatically diagnose these scans, a lot of which actually requires specialist level input. AI algorithms can also predict which eyes are more likely to progress and which eyes are not. And this kind of risk stratification is going to be increasingly important as we move towards precision medicine in ophthalmology and elsewhere. So, but I mean, we all know there are tons of AI medical studies that are coming out, but there are some important challenges that we need to recognize, right? And one is that all these algorithms need data to be trained and developed and tested. So you really need collaboration and a large number of diverse data sets for training and testing of these algorithms. And often that requires, data sets that may be geographically sort of dispersed in different centers in different countries. And in this day and age of increasing concerns about data privacy and security, then that becomes a major issue as well. There's a proliferation of all these studies that are being published pretty much almost every day. All of them claim to have very good diagnostic performance, but it's difficult to verify, whether these algorithms can really achieve the performance that they claim. And there's really a lack of transparency in the reporting of these results and the data that they use. And so when it comes to AI-based diagnostic systems being approved by regulators like the FDA and all that, then these are concerns that need to be addressed before we can sort of trust all the results that are coming out from everywhere in the world. And so the idea was born that could we use blockchain technology? Obviously, some of its benefits, like having a decentralized ledger to manage this data and to report diagnostic performance results. And this could potentially help to improve traceability and auditability, and this would help to overcome a major barrier, we think, in relation to regulatory approval for AI-based diagnostics or medical image analysis. And so there were a few different aims in the study. Not all of this is directly relevant to the blockchain, so I'll skim through some of it. But essentially, the main aim of this paper, it was really an artificial intelligence or deep learning study. And the idea was to develop an algorithm or algorithms with deep learning to automatically detect MMD and high myopia from retinal photographs. So the idea was that we'll put in a photograph as input. A photograph is easily available, and even in primary care settings, we can easily get retinal photographs. And we put them through sort of 2 or 3 different deep learning algorithms that we developed. One was for MMD, giving us the output yes or no. or based on the photograph. And for high myopia, we combine two algorithms and two definitions, and essentially to produce an output as well, a binary classification. The second aim, and you're going to see this figure a lot because I'm going to explain it in a bit, was to develop a blockchain-enabled platform for this, well, for demonstration in this study, but really the aim was for it to be used in other AI medical studies as well. And this was to help to regulate data transfer, model transfer, and provide some transparency in the reporting of performance results. And I'll go into this a bit later in more detail. What's the data that we used? In short, we used a lot. The primary data that we used was from Singapore. It was provided by the clinics that we have in SNEC, as well as some of our research data sets from SERI. And we trained the data, the algorithms that we developed here on data from Singapore. Then, to prove that these algorithms work in a variety of settings or that they are generalizable, we tested these data sets. We tested the algorithms on data sets from multiple different countries and regions. And in total, we used about more than 200,000 images. These were from 9 different cohorts, all different ethnicities, and they came from 6 regions all around the world. And they really use a variety of different retinal cameras even. So we were quite confident that the algorithms we produce here are quite generalizable. And how did they perform? So I've divided the results here into the different aims. The first one here would be MMD, and the second and the third columns here will be based on high myopia. But in short, the algorithms will show robust diagnostic performance. For MMD, the areas under the curve, the areas under the receiver operating characteristic curves were more than 0.969 across all data sets, and you can see the sensitivity and specificity were very high. For high myopia, depending on which definition we use, we also had good performance with AUC values of more than 0.913 and more than 0.956. And this is just a sort of a graphical heat map to show you what the algorithm is looking at when it's trying to make its classification decisions. So for MMD, for those of you who are not familiar, this is a retinal photograph of a patient's left eye. And these yellow patchy areas are the areas of degeneration that we're hoping the algorithm will pick up. And you can see that on the heat map, quite clearly the algorithm is using these areas. There's more activation there in making its classification decisions. And similarly with the image down here. Whereas for high myopia, they were looking at different things. You can see that these were eyes with high myopia by different criteria, and the algorithm was primarily looking at the macula right in the center, as well as the optic disc or the nerve. And so to try and prove how sort of successful our algorithms were, we tried different methods, and we basically pit the algorithm against 6 human experts. So we took an independent test data set of 400 images, 200 were MMD and 200 were high myopia. And we pit the algorithm against 6 human experts who are trained in a head-to-head comparison. So the results are the graphs here show error rates on the left here for MMD and on the right for high myopia. And you can see that, essentially the algorithm performance is the bar on the left, and the gray line there is the 95% confidence interval. So for the first task for MMD, the algorithm was at least as good as 5 of the human graders and better than 1. And in high myopia, it was at least as good as 4 of them and better than 2 of them. And actually, in terms of AUC, the algorithm outperformed all 6 human experts. We tried to use this in another use case. We had another data set from Singapore of 7 to 8,000 retinal images where we didn't know what percentage of them had MMD. And so we automatically applied the algorithm to them to grade the data set, which took a matter of minutes for 7 to 8,000 images. And when we compare the prevalence results for MMD that we got in this group against what we know from Singapore's population, we found that the prevalence rates were quite consistent and quite comparable. And so this kind of shows how we might imagine the algorithms that we develop here being used one day. And so these are some of the real world applications that we imagine. What I've just shown was the example on the right, where there are lots of these research data sets around the world where we've got retinal photographs, but we don't have data on MMD or on the patient's myopia status. And by using these algorithms automatically, we can actually generate new epidemiologic data that can be useful at the population level. We also imagine that the algorithms could be useful clinically, and we do have plans to try and prospectively validate this. And one day, this may actually happen, where at the primary care level, people get screened for their eye condition. They take a photograph, which is readily available, and then we run the photographs through these algorithms. And if they are found to have MMD, then they get essentially sent to a tertiary care provider, an ophthalmologist, for more detailed testing. And maybe these people need regular follow-up then from then on in the eye center, whereas patients who don't have MMD can just remain at the community level, in the primary care level, and just sort of be screened once a year, just with a photograph. So, I mean, I know most people are here, I suppose, for the blockchain application, and so maybe I'll spend a bit more time explaining the platform that our technical team and we have sort of demonstrated. In this study, we basically tried to deploy the platform that we designed in a real world proof of concept demonstration. And so the blockchain network that we use here was a private permission blockchain network that was created using Hyperledger Fabric. We did a limited demonstration, so we created 3 blockchain nodes at 3 sites across 2 countries, in Singapore and China. And I'll be referring to these sites quite a few times. So essentially, one of them was the primary dataset owner, which was Seri in Singapore. The AI technical team that has the expertise to build the model was at IHPC at a separate site in Singapore. And we had a collaborator from China, from Beijing in China, that was our external testing party. And all these nodes were run on AWS virtual machines. So in our proof of concept, we ran it across 3 nodes, but the network that we've designed here can be easily expanded, as you can imagine, to include more collaborators and sites. And what do we use this platform for? We basically use it to regulate 4 main steps in kind of like the development life cycle of an AI model, which all of, if you see all the published papers on AI algorithms, they will all go through this sort of life cycle. The first thing is that you need data to train an algorithm or to develop it. And so the first step, and usually the owners of the data sets will be clinical or research institutes, whereas the technical team who has the technical expertise to develop the algorithm may be at a different site. And so it's important to transfer that data set from the data set owner, and for example, in our example from Seri, to our technical team over at IHPC. Then once you've been able to train the model, then you need to be able to test it. So to test it among your collaborators, then you need to release the model and you need to show its validation results, which was the second step that we showed in our demonstration. The third thing is that if you want to show, as we did in our paper, after you develop the model locally, that it can be tested, it's successfully tested on other external data sets, then you need to be able to either transfer those data sets from other countries to you, or transfer the model to those countries. And obviously, data sets containing medical data, there are privacy issues there, and you prefer to transfer a model that you develop that doesn't really contain sensitive information rather than transferring a data set. And so we actually demonstrate sharing of the model that we've trained across borders, in a way, from Singapore to China. And you want to be able to show that the results that you achieve are good or bad. You want to know either way. And so we show the fourth step, which is after our external collaborator tested the model that we developed on their data set, they report the results of the model on chain. And I'll show you a video actually from our demonstration that we did last year. In terms of the technical architecture of how it all comes together, not everything involved the blockchain, not everything was on-chain. There were also off-chain aspects to our design. And each of the nodes or users had a software package with a browser-based UI that was developed by our team. And this basically allowed for interfacing between the different aspects, the different technical aspects of the architecture, which were the blockchain, the FTP server where the data was stored, as well as the AWS S3. So what was kept on chain in the ledger would be the pre-agreed smart contracts, any interaction records between the participants and collaborators, access logs and permissions to various data that was stored in off-chain or on-chain, data requests and approvals, as well as the metadata of all our data sets and models, which included the hash values and the images and number of patients, as well as the diagnostic performance that was reported by our models. What was actually stored off-chain, actually the sensitive medical data was all stored off-chain on secure FTP servers that were obviously secure and password protected. And the trained AI models as well were actually stored off-chain on AWS S3. And so just a sort of schematic that we published in the paper that shows the network down here, and in yellow you have basically all the things that are stored on-chain, and these are the 3 nodes who are collaborators in our demonstration and interacting with the off-chain aspects of the platform. How is data actually shared? Well, there are many steps here, but essentially it was all encrypted using asymmetric encryption. And I'm going to show a video of this that will actually illustrate all the steps here. But this just shows sort of the workflow from the data owner, as an example from Seri, transferring the data set to the technical team who were the requester, which were IHPC at A*. And you see that the data was actually stored and transferred and downloaded from the FTP server, but all the access approvals and the metadata for the datasets were all kept on the blockchain. And I'll show this in the video, which I think is coming up. So I'm just going to stop this at various points, but we'll just run this video, which was actually published in our paper as well. And it's just a short 2 to 3 minute video. So this just illustrates the 4 steps that we were trying to demonstrate. And this is step 1, where we're basically sharing the dataset from Seri over to IHPC. So this is actually what the UI looks like. I'm just going to pause this here. Sorry. This is what the UI looks like on the Seri side. And you can see that there are areas here for data sets that can be shared to be seen, as well as different tabs for model sharing and model testing, which we'll show a bit later. But essentially, the data owner here wants to upload their data set onto the FTP server, and they want to sort of publish it on the blockchain. So they can do that here. It's all integrated into the UI where they select the data set, they generate a hash value for it, which is important for data verification later on. They encrypt it, and then they upload it onto the FTP server. And once that's done, they essentially publish it on the blockchain. Now, this would be the UI that you see from another collaborator. In this case, it would be our colleagues at A*. And you can see that now that there's a data set here that is available. They can see the name of the data set, who put it up, as well as the size of the data set. And they want to, they can see all the information about it, such as the number of images and the hash value. And they can request for it on the platform. So they send a request, and then it goes across back to the original owner. And here you can see that on the UI, you're able to see the request from someone in your collaborative network and to approve the request. So at IHPC, you want to download the dataset now after approval. And when you download it, this is integrated to connect to the FTP server. You need a username and a password, and you can download the dataset from there. It gets unencrypted, and you are able to verify the integrity of the dataset. So once you've downloaded it, then you automatically generate the hash value again, and this is checked back against the hash value of what was uploaded by the data owner. And so you can ensure at all steps that there's no tampering and the data is exactly as it's supposed to be. Then after downloading the dataset, then essentially the technical team trains the model. All this is done off-chain, of course, and trains the model. And once they've trained it on the training portion of the dataset, then they want to release the model for all the other collaborators to see and use. And this sort of describes the workflow again. So this is our technical team's UI. You notice they've gone to a different tab there, which is under model sharing. And so when they want to show the validation results, they need to select both the model that they've trained as well as the specific validation data set. And all the information comes up here automatically. So once you have the data set that's here, then this is the hash value of the data set that you use, the images, and the number of patients. And then they run the model, and the diagnostic performance results are produced here, where you can see there's an AUC value, a sensitivity and specificity. They upload the model onto AWS S3, and then when they publish it on the blockchain, then it becomes viewable for all other members in the collaborative network. And so the model is here. They actually show the hash value of the data set that it was validated on. It also shows the hash value of the model and all the validation and diagnostic performance results, which are all recorded on the ledger. And I'll show you an example of the ledger after this. Now, after you've developed the model and you've published it, then your external testing party wants to download the model and test it on their own data set. And so you can see that the model is available here. The request for it from our collaborator in China here. And on the IHPC side, which is in Singapore, we approve the request, and we can see the request come up. Same way that you get requests and approvals for data, it works the same way for the AI models. So once they're able to download the data set, it gets decrypted, and then they can again verify the integrity of the data set because the hash value is here. So you know that, again, the model was not changed anywhere along the way. Then they want to test it on their own data set. In this case, in the example, it was about 1,000 images. And this is data that came from the medical center in China that they, in an ideal scenario, you wouldn't have to transfer across to anywhere, and you can keep it locally. So this helps with data privacy issues. And they select the model that they're using, which they downloaded. They select their testing data set, they run it, which is all integrated into the platform. and then they publish their diagnostic testing results. And so everybody on the blockchain can actually see, and they can't change this, that they tested the model. You actually have the hash value for the model they use, the hash value for the dataset they used, that was 1,000 images, and all these testing results are all published there, and they're all on the immutable ledger and they can't be changed. And so this is the actual video of the demonstration that we did. I think it was in April last year when we were preparing the paper. So besides what you see on the UI, actually, you can actually see all the transactions on the blockchain ledger via the Hyperledger Explorer. And I've just pulled out some screenshots from the actual ledger that was used, that was produced when we did our demonstration. So corresponding to the various steps, in the step one, which is transfer the dataset, this is actually the transaction log from our data owner sharing or publishing the dataset on the platform. You can see in the transaction payload, you've got things like the number of images, number of patients, dataset, as well as the hash value. And that's what it looks like on the UI correspondingly. This is our technical team requesting for the dataset, and then you actually have approval that's also recorded as a log as a transaction on the ledger. Then once you've downloaded a dataset, you've decrypted it and verified its integrity, all the hash value results come up here. So once it comes to step two, once you've developed your model and you want to publish it on the blockchain ledger, this is the UI that you see. These are the results that I showed earlier in the video, and this is the corresponding transaction that shows it being included in the ledger. You'll notice that besides just the data set and everything, all the performance results are all here, and so they're part of the immutable ledger that can't be changed and can always be tracked back. In terms of step three, this would be sharing the model towards the testing party, in our case, which was in China, who requests for it, and then this is the approval. And then when they finally test the result, when they test the model using the UI, again, you can see that this is published on the ledger, that the model, the dataset that they use, as well as all the performance results are all there. And so just the last couple of slides now, in the paper for the blockchain platform, we successfully demonstrated a real-world proof of concept across 3 sites from 2 countries. We managed to report the model diagnostic performance on the blockchain ledger, and the performance results that we reported here match exactly what we got when we tested them locally without the blockchain platform prior to this. We also did a small experiment looking at how it would work with any attempted malicious data modification. So with the ledger running and the blockchain network running, our system administrator, which was the AI technical team, tried to modify the model performance record at their node to sort of falsely change the performance record. But the model performance record in the shared ledger was unaffected because of majority endorsement, because it was different from what was actually reflected at the other 2 parties' nodes. And all the other parties, as designed, received the warning notification that someone was that was a failed integrity check. And so our system was able to sort of withstand this kind of malicious data modification. So we think that the advantages of the platform that we've designed are that it obviously produces a shared ledger for easier collaboration. As you can see, this study had many moving parts. There were many different people and centers involved in it, and so it provides automated updates on data consistency, and you can have collaborators join at any point in the process, later on or earlier on. It provides traceability and access controls. All the participant interactions are recorded, and all the data and model access and permissions are all very clearly set out. It provides greater transparency in the data and the models used, which helps to reproduce performance results if necessary. And it provides easy verification of data integrity via hash values. And the most important thing really, we think, is that everything that's here is all recorded on an immutable ledger. And so that can always be produced later on for verification purposes. And so as a summary, this is just the last slide. Really, in this study, we developed retinal photograph-based algorithms for detection of MMD and high myopia. We showed that the algorithms we developed had good performance across all datasets, and they performed at least as well as 6 human experts in a head-to-head comparison. And these could really be important tools, for triage and risk stratification in myopia, especially if they're validated further on. And what we think the major impact from our paper comes as well from the fact that we showed a concrete application of blockchain technology together with AI. We managed to show secure handling of data and model transfer, as well as reporting of performance results. And this may help to overcome a lot of the barriers related to dataset sharing in collaborative research. If we can use this to improve transparency and accountability in reporting of diagnostic performance, then this could be an important tool for regulatory approval of not just AI algorithms in ophthalmology, but really across medicine, we hope. And that whether that can be done remains to be seen. And with that, I thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions anybody has. Thank you.
Thanks, Tianan, for the very impressive talk. Yeah, learned a lot. And once again, congrats on the paper being published. I think we have time for one or two questions from the audience. Any burning questions?
Hi, yeah, I've got a question. My name's Wayne. So I'm not sure if you will be able to answer this, but essentially, when you're using the blockchain, from what I gather, a lot of it is to do with like data verification. So what benefits does doing like this blockchain have compared to, say, MD5 checksums where you can validate the data using, just the existing stuff for verification? Thanks.
Sure. Well, I have to say I'm not quite familiar, I suppose, with the MD checksums, but I guess what you're kind of referring to is like if you're just using a sort of a checksum function, like a hash value without actually the blockchain function. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like when it's like direct peer-to-peer, then you can check it on your end.
Yeah, so I mean, I think if data verification is the only thing that you're worried about, then that would probably help. But I think there are additional benefits to the platform that we developed because, I mean, essentially, between two parties or individuals, between two individuals, then you can always have a bit of falsification of results, especially when it comes to diagnostic performance. And I think that one of the things that we hope our platform is able to do is that if you developed, along the way of developing your algorithm, besides internally verifying your data and all that, if you can actually show your performance results that were verified in a way based on the protocols by other parties on the network, then actually that provides a strong way to audit or provide transparency to your results. And I think that's an important step towards regulatory approval. I mean, I agree with you. I think individually, some of the functions of this platform can be done in other ways, but I think what we provide is a bit more than that. But yeah, I mean, I take your point about the checksum function. Thanks for the question. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. And the paper is impressive, so well done. Just want to say my congrats as well.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? If not, maybe I'll just ask a question. So, so to capitalize on the decentralized properties of blockchain, people usually talk about building their systems on open public blockchains. So, do you foresee this system being built on an open public blockchain in the future?
Well, I mean, I think when we sort of envision this, we sort of always intended for it to be a permission blockchain. I mean, for a few reasons. I think one is, when you run medical studies, cost is an issue. And I think it's definitely a lot lower cost to run it as a private sort of permission blockchain. Secondly, I think when it comes to this, you really want everybody, you want the network to be permissioned, I think, and you really want to have control over who joins your blockchain network and who doesn't. Because at the end of the day, even if you're dealing with just anonymized medical data and then there's permissions access and all that, I don't think you want completely anonymous users to be able to join. So I think you would be giving up some of that. You would be sort of introducing some disadvantages into the system where you don't really need to. So I mean, I guess we have always sort of envisioned this, even if you expand the scale of it to include more collaborators, we always sort of envisioned it as a private blockchain.
Andrew, it's Daniel. Let me just probably chime in here as well.
Hi, Dan.
Hey, hi. Yeah, I mean, Andrew, I think we discussed about this, the use of public versus private before, and also versus the hybrid, right? I mean, which is what Hyperledger is trying to do. So, I mean, as you and a lot of us here are aware, public blockchain, actually the transactional speed is always a problem, right? And then the cost of maintaining a public blockchain platform is also another issue. So how do you actually achieve a sustainability in terms of maintaining all these things, and let alone that you actually have to park some of these things on the cloud? So all this cost of maintenance is something that we actually are talking about. I mean, Tiana has also brought out another point about the private blockchain. I mean, the good thing is is really related to how you could actually grant access to the people that you want to invite to the to the network of the users, and becoming all the different nodes and stuff. So I think when we actually build a platform, all these are different factors we also need to take into place. And then of course there's a newer the change is coming out as well. So I mean those are the things that actually are improving. So comparing like Ethereum and Bitcoin, we know like Ethereum's the technology, actually transactional speed is actually much faster now. But having said that, I mean the nodes wise and stuff, and Bitcoin is still actually much better, as we know. So I mean those are the things that there's a few quite a lot of it's not just few, quite a lot of consideration factors when you're actually trying to build the nodes and using deciding which platform, public versus private versus the hybrid, to do the things that to address the clinical unmet need. Yeah.
Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, there's a lot of considerations and trade-offs, but it's quite a strategic decision when I guess anyone's going on to develop a blockchain application. Yeah, thanks so much. Okay, so yeah, thanks so much, Tiernan and Daniel. We'll move on to the next presentation. So our next speaker is Dr. Yao Deng Yen. He's the Chief Digital Therapeutics Officer at Hallmark. He has vast knowledge of medical informatics and digital health, and he has a unique experience being both, having both worked in the public and the private healthcare sector in Singapore. So today he'll share his insights on the digital health trends and developments globally. So Deng Yen, please.
Yeah, sure. Andrew, thanks for this. Just give me a moment to let me figure out this screen sharing thing. Oh. Okay. Oh gosh, I think I have to quit Zoom. Something is on.
You want me to share for you?
Okay, give me a.
Okay, well, he's coming back in. I apologize about the bell ringing. Yeah, every time someone joins. So sorry about that. Not very sure how to turn it off.
Sorry, Andrew. I hope I didn't run, take too much time. Hope Deng Yen still has good time for his talk.
Yeah, free and easy this one. So yeah.
Okay, let me try again. I think it's something to do with the screen with. It says the host has disabled screen sharing, Andrew. Maybe just.
Okay, let me make you the co-host again. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. I think this works now. Great. Okay, sorry for that technical difficulties. Okay, great. Now we can see, and I will say really a big thanks to Andrew for really inviting me here today to really speak. Just a very quick introduction about myself. I'm Ting. I'm a medical doctor by training. I'll share with you a little bit about my story. But today, I've really immersed myself in the last 7 years really in the healthcare technology space. And what I'd like to do probably over the next 15 minutes or so is to just give you a little bit of a flavor of what's going on in this industry. And at the end, I'll also share with you my views on the blockchain, on decentralized networks, which is something that I'm very excited about. Just some quick notes. I work at Hallmark. Hallmark is basically a global data science and healthcare company. We actually started Hallmark back here in Singapore about 6 years ago. My partner and I started the company. Since then, we've actually grown to close to about 100 team members distributed globally. We've raised more than $35 million in funding, and we go very deep into the mental health space. We help to create various data platforms that help to help researchers to conduct clinical trials in a better way, help clinicians to understand how their patients, particularly in certain psychiatric disorders like major depressive disorder, Alzheimer's disease, as well as schizophrenia, how they can actually model out the disease severity in a much better way. But I'm not going to bore you with all of this. I'm really going to go straight into how I see things going out in the future. So I really like to share this this image, and this is basically something that really changed my life. When I first entered medical school, probably about 20 years ago, there was no such thing as a smartphone. Everything was clunky. I'm not sure if you remember those very old kind of Nokia phones. Also really difficult to use. But back in 2007, and that was the year that I did my housemanship, Steve Jobs launched the very first iPhone back in 2007. And at that point in time, everybody thought that it was going to be a flop. It was going to fail. But today, we can see that iPhone is one of the most used items in this world. And this really has transformed the way we view healthcare technology, the use of mobile and the smartphone. So if you look at healthcare technology, actually there are quite a variety of very different things. It's very diverse. We have things like AI, machine learning, digital therapeutics, telemedicine, medical devices, genomics, wearables, wellness, a whole laundry list of different things. Because I don't have a lot of time, probably I just want to talk a little bit about the AI and machine learning and the digital therapeutics part of things, and the rest, just a very quick flavor of it. But I think very importantly, as we look about innovation in any different space, right, it always follows this curve, this Gartner curve. And it's very true. You can see when something new comes into place, it always goes through a period of hype. It gets to a point where everybody thinks it's really going to solve the world. It's going to make the world a different place. And then we get disillusioned. We realize that actually it's not able to solve all the problems that we had. And one very typical example is, say, the Human Genome Project. When we first sequenced the human genome back in 2001, we thought we would be able to solve, we would be able to cure cancer in the next 10, 15 years. But come today, we are still struggling very much with this problem today, just because of the whole complexity of the human genome. But over time, through a lot of effort, through a lot of hard work, with a new technology, we start to find the use cases that actually have real life value. And that's where we actually start to see these things start to become mainstream. And you can see some examples, and I think everybody has different views of where we are in this cycle with some of this technology. I used this slide probably about a year back in another presentation, but I think we're not too far off. Where I think over the last couple of years we've seen a lot of hype about AI, and I think we are somewhere around there, right? And if you look at something that was developed a little bit earlier, like Google Glass, right? We thought that everybody was going to wear a bit of Google Glass, and we were going to see the world through that lens of that. But we know, it crashed. Google stopped using a Google Glass. But today we've also found some very interesting use cases of Google Glasses that are still in use today as of right now. For example, being able to, say, broadcast surgery as a training tool for medical trainees or so. So there are very specific use cases, and all of these tools are going to start to develop and get some traction. If you look at the landscape outside around digital health, you can see that there's a huge amount of interest in this whole space. If you look at the funding, and you can see the different graphs represent different geographic areas. And I want to thank my friends at Galen Grove to be able to share some of this data. We can see from 2016 out to 2020, the growth in funding in digital health has almost tripled. From about 5 billion in the US back in 2016 to more than 17 billion right now. And if you look at some of the most funded therapeutic areas in healthcare technology, and this will give you a flavor of what's the hottest thing that's there right now. You can probably kind of guess as well. So oncology, for sure, is one of the biggest spaces. There's huge amount of money. There's huge amount of pharma money in particular, because drugs are just so expensive to both develop and sell. There's huge amount of areas, I would say use cases in oncology space. Cardiovascular diseases, for sure, chronic disease management, infectious diseases, and I think in particular over the last 2 years, there's been a huge amount of interest in this space. And of course, something that I personally am also very passionate about, and what we do day to day in at Hallmark is really on the mental health aspect. And these are sort of the top areas that are being funded and where a lot of innovation is happening right now. I think if we go look into healthcare innovation, I think some things we always need to talk a little bit about is about regulation. And I think especially when we talk about digital, in the past, a lot of regulation has been around regulating drugs, pharmaceuticals, and there is a very set process around how these things are regulated. But as we move into digital, which moves so fast, for example, an AI algorithm can change as you input a different set of data into it. How does regulation keep up with all these different tools? And what I feel very comfortable in is that the regulators are taking a much more, I would say, nuanced view to some of these things. Some of the things are happening in the US in terms of really being able to regulate software as a medical device, and really allow, what this does is that it really enables innovation and technologies to go to market in a much quicker way. So just a little bit of a couple of topics I want to cover. And actually with this, I do want to thank TNF actually for doing quite a lot of work already, because some of the things I'm going to share on this, you've already covered in the previous slide or so. But essentially, I think the picture around data and AI, especially in healthcare, is that there's a huge amount of data that we're collecting in healthcare. And we know that we have the computing power to be able to both store this data as well as run computations on this data in a very cheap manner. And so that allows us and really enables to develop algorithms to do these predictions. I can tell you that 99.9% of healthcare data is not being used. It's just sitting down there in silos. No one is actually really unlocking the value of this data due to a couple of different challenges around that. But basically, that's why I'm so excited about the healthcare AI space, is because once you're able to get this data out into a form that is analyzable through, say, platforms like what data platforms that, say, other companies might create, or research platforms, or what Tianan has shared, I think that's where you can really start to unlock the power of this. Interestingly, I also brought out a couple of examples around the use of AI in ophthalmology, because I think that was one of the, to me, the biggest use cases. And there's been a number of companies and organizations throughout the world that have actually make use of retinal images to help to do predictions around some of these technologies, to develop some tools. And it's an amazing thing, because some of these are actually going into clinical practice right now, which is, I think, the most important thing. As you develop a technology, you want to see actually being in use, and not just purely as a research kind of a purpose. So I'm not going to talk too much about the use case on the eye. I think Ken has covered that very well. Some of the other very interesting cases about AI is really, for example, development of chatbots. There's a very big company called Babylon Health in the UK, which basically does chatbot basically for consultations and triaging of medical issues and problems. And you can see that very interesting. I wanted to juxtapose this together, because you can see on one hand, it can say that the AI is actually smarter than GPs and able to score higher on their medical exams than GPs in the UK. But then there's a lot of feedback from users as well that says that the AI is not helping them to solve any of the problems at all. So I think we are really at this stage where there's a lot of tension, that technology needs to get better, and I'm confident that it will get better, but there is still a long way to go before we get to something that is really of particular value. Just want to mention as well is that AI systems can also be attacked. And this was something very interesting that I saw, is that, for example, if you lay upon a little bit of noise to some retinal images, which you can't detect with your normal eye, suddenly the AI algorithm, the accuracy of that suddenly gets thrown off entirely also. Right? So these, I think, there are some pitfalls that we have to be aware as you adopt and start to use AI-based systems. In Hallmarks, what we do is very much, we work a lot with natural language processing modules, because a lot of the data we do is very unstructured data in terms of doctor's notes, because of the space that we are in particular psychiatric care. And we've been able to publish a couple of papers around natural language processing, how we've been able to identify symptoms, disease severity of patients with major depressive disorder through that. So there's something I'll just leave there, but really not going into very much technical detail about. Another area I want to touch on, and this is also something that I am personally very invested in, is really in the field of digital therapeutics. And you might ask, like, what is digital therapeutics? Essentially, digital therapeutics are a new class of treatments. And basically, these are, you can think of it as a pill, as a drug that can actually modify your clinical outcomes, but deliver in a digital format. Right. And you can see, I really like this timeline here that shows the evolution of treatments From initially, we were working very much with small molecules like antibiotics. We moved into larger protein-based molecules, recently cell and gene therapy. But now in the coming decades, I think digital therapies are going to play a very much bigger part and bigger role in healthcare. What makes a successful digital therapeutic? I think it needs to accomplish three main things. One, it needs to be for sure clinically effective. It needs to be able to improve very important clinical markers. Be it, say, a diabetic tool, you need to be able to improve diabetes. You need to improve glucose control. It needs to be scalable, and that's really leveraging the advantages of digital. It needs to be able to be deployed in large populations in relative ease. And I think a third very important thing for digital therapeutics is being able to change the financing models for medications. For example, when we sell a pill, the typical pharma-based model is where you pay for a pill, you take that pill. Whereas through digital models, because we're able to start to capture outcomes, we're able to understand how well patients are actually doing on these digital tools, we can actually create very interesting, innovative financial models that allows us to say charge based on outcomes instead. So if you don't actually get any benefit from that particular pill or that digital product, why should you be charged for that particular thing? So this really unlocks very new payment models, which I would say align different stakeholders in healthcare a lot closer. A couple of quick examples about some of the digital therapeutics that have been quite successful. For example, Omada Health in the US launched a diabetes prevention program, which is fully digital and essentially the largest diabetes prevention program in the world. With by now it's probably 200,000 or 300,000 participants who have gone through the entire program, and they have been able to show through clinical studies they actually are able to achieve the same level of result as per a face-to-face kind of program. Another successful model of digital therapeutic is basically a Reset-O, which is basically opioid dependence program that is basically paired with a drug. And we showed that the combination of the digital tool, which is provided to the patient in the form of a mobile app, together the drug is actually able to achieve a higher level of efficacy as well as compliance to that particular treatment. And this is basically one of the successes, I would say, and is being marketed right now, approved by the FDA back in 2018. And these are a couple of screenshots of how that Reset-O looks like. It's basically a mobile app that comprises a couple of educational tools that also allows you to track your patient-reported outcomes, which sort of like feeds back into some information that you actually get. One of the, I would say, advantage of digital of combined drug and digital therapy is that really you are able to, I think you can see so many different combinations that can potentially come out of all of this. And I think the main advantages of this is really it actually can have the potential to improve efficacy compared to the drug. I think if we think about digital therapeutics, we want to think about how can it improve things in, I would say, a few ways. Like one, can it increase compliance to a particular treatment or medication? So that's one advantage. That's one way it can improve patient outcomes. Secondly, can that digital therapeutic on its own, the software itself, lead to an improvement in patient outcomes? So there are software, there are game tools right now that can be used to treat ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder right now. And that software itself is able to modify the disease from using the software on a regular basis. And the third is how can you provide, I would say, greater access to the form of, say, coaching, health coaching, nudges to that particular patient that actually helps to drive behavior change in a much deeper, much more scalable way than you can ever possibly could through a face-to-face encounter with a doctor or the clinician every 3 months or 6 months. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into some of the details of some of the scientific studies that we've done, but I would just say that this is a very big space that's sort of like growing very rapidly and very quickly, and something that's actually very interesting. And I would love to talk about that. Now that we're coming to close to about 6:30 already, I just want to take probably just about 2 or 3 minutes to share a little bit of my views about blockchain, right? How does blockchain fit into all of this in terms of from the healthcare technology spectrum? And I personally see that it's a game changer. I am on the view, looking at everything that's come, is that decentralized networks and the technology that we have to be able to develop these decentralized networks is basically one of the largest technological revolutions that we are in the midst of after the internet, right? It's a game changer. And if you look at if you know, the typical adage is that software eats the world, right? And that's the famous quote by A16Z. But if you look at the two industries where software has not particularly changed the industry, this is in finance and this is in healthcare. And the reason why it hasn't changed really these industries or moved it so much is because these industries are highly regulated and highly permissioned. And if you look at what's happening in the blockchain space, in the crypto space right now, an entirely new, more equitable financial system is actually being built from the ground up. And it's amazing to see all of that that's happening. I myself am actually a very, I use Uniswap quite a lot, and just seeing how something like that, an automated market maker, is able to provide liquidity for things that you're normally not able to get liquidity for in typical order book based kind of exchanges. And so it is that kind of mindset, thinking out of the box, thinking in different ways, which I see the power of all of this. And today, with that technology, especially now that we have some scalability solutions and layer 2s that are able to help to overcome some of the scalability issues that Dr. Daniel Ting mentioned a little bit earlier, where now we can see with layer 2 solutions, we can process thousands of transactions per second. I think it's really the right time that a lot of this can be applied in healthcare. And so really the thought that I want to leave everybody is how can we leverage this technology and find new approaches to some of the most pressing healthcare problems today. And I would say 3 big ideas that I just want to share, and throw this out there. Firstly, through decentralized permissionless networks, can we solve some of the major human coordination failures right now? And I would say one of the biggest failure is that there is a monopolization of data and value at institutions, the Web 2.0 companies like your Google, Facebook, Amazons, all of them own your health, own your data. Apple Watch captures all the data. Do you have access to the data? No, Apple has that, and they monetize that data. There is data lack of interoperability. Like I mentioned, 99% of healthcare data is not really being used because they're stuck in silos somewhere, vulnerable to breaches, and they're not able to talk to each other. And within the whole healthcare system, there is a misalignment of incentives where not all the stakeholders in the healthcare space, and I'm talking about, and stakeholders you can think about as innovators, insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, there are times where they are not all aligned towards the greater good of their patient. And so with decentralized networks, are we able to bring all the different parties together without that central authority and central control to be able to overcome some of these challenges? So that's one idea I want to leave you with. The second is, can we empower the individual through digital rights and privacy on healthcare data, where you actually own your data, you can provide, you can control who has access to your healthcare data and know who is seeing your healthcare data through these decentralized blockchain networks. For example, I was actually speaking to a company just yesterday. It was very interesting. It's called EncryptGen. And basically what they do is that they actually take your DNA data that you actually collect from actually doing, say, a 23andMe test in the US. And 23andMe basically conduct these DNA tests, but basically they take the data and they monetize the data and they sell it to research organizations to use for their research purposes. Basically through this, I would say blockchain platform, what you can do is you can actually tokenize your DNA into an NFT, and basically you can actually provide that NFT. You can actually decide if you want to allow researchers to use your data or how much you might want to charge researchers to be able to use that data. They've been around for the last couple of years. They've mentioned that they are I would say some of the main challenges is really how can they grow their data set in a way that's large enough to be of value to researchers. So they're targeting to get about 10,000 genome sequence on their platform. But I think it's just an amazing application of technology that really brings the power back to the individual, back to the patient. And then the final big idea that I'm very excited about is really how can we tokenize health? Can we use tokenized incentives or even things like NFTs to start to drive behavior change in new ways? Having worked in this space for a very long time, I know that getting people to change their behavior is the most difficult problem in healthcare. In fact, if we can get people to eat healthier, if we can get people to sleep better, if we can get people to exercise more, it will solve 90% of all the healthcare problems that we actually are facing in the world right now. So behavior change is the holy grail of healthcare that we have not solved yet. but can we find ways through these crypto economics to sort of like incentivize people to start to make changes to the right kind of behavior? I don't have the answers to these problems. I'm very excited to really think a lot more deeply into some of these things, and I hope some of you might be able to get the answers to these things. And just finally, I just want to leave with a note, is that, and I really love this quote a lot, is that it's from Bill Gates, and it says that we often overestimate the change that will occur in the next 2 years and underestimate the change that will occur in the next 10 years. And looking at what's happening in the blockchain space, in the decentralized network space, I can say that in the next 10 or 20 years, the world is going to be an entirely different space from where we are at right now. So with that, thanks a lot for just listening to me ramble on a little bit. If you'd like to talk blockchain, I would definitely love to chat with you. So feel free to drop me an email over here. I'm going to be actually spending a lot of time exploring whether we could solve some of these problems that I mentioned a little bit earlier on this space. So I would love to have a chat with you if you have any ideas around these different things. So with that, thanks a lot. Back to you, Andrew.
Thanks again. Very interesting talk and very enticing, big ideas. Yeah. So again, any questions from the audience? Wait, if not, maybe I have one question for Ting Yan. Yeah, so gazing into your crystal ball, what do you see as perhaps how would the next killer debt in healthcare space look like? What form and shape might it take?
So to be honest, I wish I had that crystal ball. If I knew the future, I would be a lot. Yeah, I would be in a great space for sure. But I guess I can share some thoughts. Is that I see that the great, if you call it like killer app, is not going to be on a permission chain. It's going to be permissionless. It's not going to be centralized. It'll be fully decentralized. And I think it is going to be something that approaches a traditional problem in a way that's entirely different that we would normally not think about in that space. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is going to be. But yeah, I think it's going to be that. I think the other thing that I think I'm also extremely fascinated about is the concept of decentralized organizations, where I think that really is able to solve a lot of typical coordination problems that we face as we go about our daily lives. Where I think typically, organizations, especially in a regulated space like healthcare, is very much through central authority, which actually determines what you can do or what you can't do. But basically, decentralized healthcare organization, I think that's something that's very interesting and very powerful.
Okay. Thanks again. Any more questions? Mindful of time, it's 6:38 in Singapore. Yeah, if not, yeah, once again, join our blockchain in healthcare today Singapore chapter on LinkedIn, or you can just register on the blockchain healthcare today website. Yeah, so thanks Tian En and Ting Yan for the wonderful presentations, and yeah, have a good evening, everyone.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Thank you.